Welcome! For this video, we will be talking about the brainstem, and this is just going to be an overview of the entire structure, and in the succeeding mini lectures, we'll be uh, taking it apart and discussing each of the subcomponents of the brainstem in turn. Now, let's begin with this nice gross picture of your brainstem. So, um, I hope you did see my live video on Facebook where we dealt with a clay model of the brainstem. Anyway, what you see here now is a picture of the central nervous system viewed from below, and you can really see the brainstem, no? From the crus cerebri here. This is your midbrain, and then you could see, nope, we'll use red. You can see the pons right here. The most prominent thing that you can find usually, that you usually latch on to, is your pons, and then just below that is your medulla. And after your medulla would be your spinal cord as a continuous structure. Um, there you go. So let's go into the general structure. Now, we are going to draw the brainstem. In the anterior view, now we're going to draw the brainstem. So let's start with the anterior view. For the midbrain, all you have to do is draw two big pillars, like so. For your pons, okay, let's label that first, midbrain. For your pons, you draw a nice fat wig. Okay, there. That's your pons. And then for your medulla, first you draw a straight line in the middle, then two prominences here on one side, and then another prominence, and then your inferior cerebellar peduncle. There. So, this is your pons, and this is your medulla. No biggie, no big deal when it comes to your anterior view. What's going to be a bit tricky would be your posterior view. Okay, so let's do that. The posterior view of the brainstem is a bit more complicated because I'll draw the lateral view first just to give you an idea. So the lateral view or the side view features your midbrain, your pons, and your medulla here. Okay. Now, what's important to note is that your brainstem is the only connection to the cerebellum. Okay. So this is done through your cerebellar peduncles. Cerebellar. Can I fit that? Nope. Cerebellar peduncles. You have three pairs. Okay? You have your superior, middle, and inferior cerebellar peduncles. So, your midbrain has your superior cerebellar peduncle, your pons has your middle cerebellar peduncle, and your medulla has your inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay, and so this is your cerebellum here. Aside from that, not only do you have the cerebellum as you go posteriorly, you also have a cavity here, okay, filled with cerebrospinal fluid. And that cavity we call the fourth ventricle. Okay, so once you cut this part here, you take away the cerebellum. Now you will open up, you will see the fourth ventricle, or at least half of the fourth ventricle. And so now, with that in mind, let's go to the posterior view, because what we're going to see now is this part. Okay? Again, what we're going to see would be this part. Now, let's draw that. So, you have, again, your midbrain. You have your pons here, and then you have your medulla here. I'm just drawing it roughly for now. You have this part here, and it's basically, let's draw a rhomboid or a diamond. You call that, this part is basically your rhomboid fossa because of the shape. That's the floor of your fourth ventricle. So basically, your midbrain, you have your inferior cerebellar peduncle, okay? Your pons, you have your middle cerebellar peduncle there. And then your medulla has your superior cerebellar peduncle, I mean, with the midbrain. And then your medulla, you have your inferior cerebellar peduncle. So basically, you have all those walls forming your rhomboid fossa. And basically, if you put back your cerebellum, now you have a cavity. That's your fourth ventricle. Okay, we'll discuss your ventricular system at a later date. Anyway, let's go back to your midbrain. In the midbrain, posteriorly, you have four round objects here. That's your colliculi, colliculus, singular. Okay, colliculus. You have your superior colliculi and then your inferior colliculi. In the floor of your rhomboid fossa, you have some bulges there. Okay, and then down here in your medulla, you also have a midline sulcus there and some more bulges there. Okay, we'll discuss that in turn as we go along. Anyway, what's important posteriorly are these peduncles here, this fossa over here. Okay, those are the things that you need to think about. Now, your midbrain, or sorry, your brainstem is basically a conduit between your brain up here and your spinal cord down here. You have fibers going down and going up. Okay, so it's a highway. But not only that, it also has very important nuclei overlying critical functions. So your life support systems basically are in the brainstem. If you take out the brain, the cortex, your cerebral cortex, you might not be able to think lofty thoughts, but basically it's your brainstem that will keep you alive. So look at this. Look at this list here. Your brainstem basically has your respiratory center, especially in your medulla. You have your centers that regulate CO2 levels, O2 levels. It regulates how fast you breathe, how deep you breathe. You have your heart rate and blood pressure regulation centers. You have your reticular activating system. Reticular activating system that basically governs wakefulness. Okay, you destroy the RAS, you basically put yourself into a coma. So your brainstem is a very important part. And if you look at it, let's draw the skull in side view. Okay. Okay, there we go. So basically your calvarium, your um, the cavity there, you have your anterior fossa, you have your middle fossa, and then you have your posterior fossa. And basically, your, oh, there's your cerebellum there. Your brainstem is here in your posterior fossa. So part of your posterior fossa structures would be your brainstem. Part of your midbrain, entirely your pons, medulla, and your cerebellum. Okay? Now, we cannot discuss the midbrain without discussing your cranial nerves. Okay? So, just a quick overview. Anyway, we've already drawn the brain here. Let me draw a better one. Let's draw the brain. You have a total of 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Okay? That's your midbrain, pons, medulla, spinal cord. Okay. Now, you have, let's talk cranial nerves. You have 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So, remember, when you talk about the brainstem, you cannot not talk about the cranial nerves. So here it is. In your brain, from exiting or coming out from your brain itself, you have two cranial nerves. Coming out from the midbrain, you have two more cranial nerves. From your pons, you have four, and from your medulla, you have four. So basically, 2 plus 2 plus 4 plus 4, that makes 12. Okay? So, cranial nerves. Let's begin. Basically, here, olfactory bulb, cranial nerve 1, optic nerve, cranial nerve 2, oculomotor, cranial nerve 3, trochlear nerve, cranial nerve 4, a very big nerve here, cranial nerve 5, and then between your pons and your medulla, you have your 6, 7, and 8. Okay? And then, in your medulla, between your olives here and your inferior cerebellar peduncle, you have your 9, 10, 11. And then between your pyramids and your olives, you have number, we'll draw it over here. Pyramids, olives, number 12. Okay? Very, very quick, very simple, easy to remember. Okay? Now, I'm just going to show you this. You can see that although the cranial nerves exit from specific levels of the brainstem, many times your cranial nerves are actually, well, the nuclei actually occupy not just one level of the brainstem. For example, you see this very long nuclei here. This is your nuclei of the trigeminal cranial nerve 5. So your trigeminal nerve extends from the midbrain, pons, medulla, and even part of your spinal cord, your substantia gelatinosa. Okay, so this is one fact that I did not realize when I was a PT student. So it's nice that you know that your cranial nerve nuclei may not occupy a nice little round circle as illustrated in the cross sections in your textbook. In fact, actually, let's talk about cranial nerve 11, your spinal accessories. Some would even say, even Snell's neuroanatomy would say, that it's not even a full citizen of your medulla. Snell would even venture out to say that actually spinal accessory is from your spinal cord and it simply extended up into your medulla emerging out as your spinal accessory. Okay, so anyway, it won't really affect your learning or the way you interpret your physical findings, but it's a nice tidbit of information. So we'll end there. That's a basic overview of your of your brainstem. And in the next 2 or 3 videos, we'll be discussing each of the brainstem components in turn. Okay, so thank you. Please read your textbooks, your Snell Neuroanatomy, and if you want, you could also read up on your neuroanatomy made ridiculously simple, although that part is not quite so simple. So we're going to simplify it some more, hopefully. So thank you and see you then.